Trump's shocking stance, no justice for Ukraine? Hold on to your hats, folks, because Donald Trump is back and he's brought his unique brand of diplomacy with him. Known for his unconventional and often controversial approaches, Trump has once again managed to stir the pot on the global stage. In a move that surprised pretty much everyone, Trump has signaled that the U.S. might just walk away from holding Russia accountable for war crimes in Ukraine. This decision has left many scratching their heads and wondering about the future of international justice. Yep, you heard that right. As the world watches in disbelief, Trump seems to be taking a stance that could have far-reaching implications. As the world cries out for justice, Trump seems content to let bygones be bygones. This has not only shocked the international community but also raised serious questions about the U.S.'s role in global affairs. The timing couldn't be worse. With tensions already high and the situation in Ukraine deteriorating, this move could not have come at a more critical juncture. The U.S. is pushing for a quick end to the war in Ukraine. However, the approach Trump is advocating for seems to be at odds with the principles of justice and accountability. But Trump's idea of peace doesn't involve holding Russia accountable for its actions. Instead, it appears to be more about expediency and moving on, regardless of the consequences. He's even gone so far as to criticize Zelensky, the president of Ukraine, who has been at the forefront of the fight for his country's sovereignty. Leaving Ukraine out of peace talks, which many see as a betrayal of a key ally in the region, and telling Europe to pick up the slack. This has not gone down well with European leaders who are already grappling with their own challenges. It's a bold strategy, Cotton. Let's see if it pays off. Trump's confidence in his approach is evident, but whether it will yield positive results remains to be seen. This whole thing has sparked outrage across the globe. Protests have erupted in various countries, with people demanding justice and accountability. People are understandably concerned about the message this sends about human rights and the future of international justice. The idea that powerful nations can act with impunity is a troubling one. It's like watching a schoolyard bully get away with stealing someone's lunch money while the principal shrugs and looks the other way. The implications of this stance are profound, and the world is watching closely to see how it all unfolds. The United Nations and other international bodies are now faced with the challenge of addressing this new reality. How they respond could shape the future of global diplomacy and justice. History has shown us the importance of holding perpetrators accountable. From Nuremberg to The Hague, the world has stood up against war crimes. Will this be a step backward? For the people of Ukraine, this is not just a political issue. It's about justice for the countless lives lost and the suffering endured. Their voices must not be ignored. As global leaders weigh in, the pressure mounts on Trump and his administration to reconsider their stance. The world is watching, and the stakes could not be higher. In the end, the quest for justice and peace is a universal one. It's a reminder that in our interconnected world, the actions of one nation can have ripple effects across the globe. As we look to the future, the hope is that justice will prevail and that the sacrifices of the Ukrainian people will not be in vain. The world must stand together in the face of injustice. The world pushes for prosecution, Trump pushes back. The international community, bless their hearts, is trying to do the right thing. They are coming together, united in their call for justice, hoping to hold those responsible accountable. They're pushing for a special tribunal, like the Nuremberg trials after World War II, to prosecute Russia for its actions in Ukraine. This tribunal would be a monumental step, a beacon of hope for international law and order. It's a long shot, sure, but it's an important one. The stakes are incredibly high and the world is watching closely. The pursuit of justice is never easy, but it's a fight worth fighting. But Trump, he's not on board. He's taking a different stance, one that many find perplexing and frustrating. He's basically said, let's not call Russia an aggressor, because that might make things awkward. Awkward? Awkward? This is not just a minor diplomatic faux pas. We're talking about potential war crimes here, people. The devastation in Ukraine is real and the suffering is immense. This isn't a fender bender. This is a humanitarian crisis of epic proportions. European leaders are understandably freaking out. They see the urgency and the necessity of a unified response. They're worried that if the U.S. bails on this, the whole tribunal could fall apart. The integrity of international justice is at stake. And let's be honest, they're probably right. Without the support of major powers, the tribunal's effectiveness is severely compromised. It's like trying to bake a cake without any flour. You need all the essential ingredients to make it work. You might end up with something, but it's not going to be pretty. The world needs to come together, fully committed, to ensure justice is served. Ukraine cries foul, Europe worries, and the world watches. Ukraine, understandably, is not thrilled about this. They've been fighting tooth and nail for their survival, and now the US, their supposed ally, is telling them to just get over it? Talk about adding insult to injury. European allies are worried too. They've been working with the US to hold Russia accountable, and now it feels like Trump is pulling the rug out from under them. It's enough to make you wonder if the special relationship is all it's cracked up to be. Human rights organizations are up in arms too. They're worried that if Russia gets away with this, it'll set a dangerous precedent for other authoritarian regimes. And let's be honest, they've got a point. If you don't stand up to bullies, they're just going to keep bullying. What's Trump thinking? America first again? So, what's the deal with Trump's stance? What exactly is going on in his mind as he navigates the complex world of international politics? Well, it wouldn't be a Trumpian foreign policy move without a healthy dose of America first. This slogan has been a cornerstone of his political identity, resonating deeply with his base. Trump seems to think that the US is doing too much heavy lifting when it comes to Ukraine. He believes that the United States has been overly generous in its support, both militarily and financially, and he wants Europe to step up. In his view, European nations have been relying too heavily on American resources and should take more responsibility for their own backyard. He's also criticized the amount of money the US is spending on Ukraine, pointing out that the financial burden is becoming unsustainable for American taxpayers, saying it's time for Europe to open up their wallets a bit more. He argues that European countries, with their robust economies, are more than capable of contributing more to the cause. Now, there's nothing wrong with asking allies to contribute their fair share. In fact, it's a reasonable expectation in any alliance. But there's a way to do it without throwing everyone under the bus. Diplomacy is an art, and it requires a delicate balance of firmness and tact. But here's the thing, this isn't just about money. It's about the broader implications of America's role on the world stage. It's about sending a message that could reshape international relations and alliances for years to come. And the message Trump is sending is that the US is no longer interested in leading the charge for international justice. This marks a significant shift from the traditional American stance, and that's a dangerous message to send. It could embolden adversaries and create uncertainty among allies, potentially destabilizing the global order. Historically, the US has been seen as a beacon of hope and a leader in promoting democracy and human rights. This new approach could undermine decades of diplomatic efforts. The world is watching closely and the stakes are incredibly high. The decisions made today will have far-reaching consequences for future generations. So as we ponder what's next, one thing is clear. Trump's America First policy is more than just a slogan. It's a fundamental shift in how the US engages with the world. And whether you agree with it or not, it's a conversation that will continue to shape the future of international relations and America's place in the world. A divided West. Can the US and Europe stay united? Trump's stance on Ukraine has driven a wedge between the US and its European allies. Europe is committed to holding Russia accountable, while the US seems content to let bygones be bygones. It's like watching a married couple argue about what to have for dinner, except, the stakes are infinitely higher. This isn't the first time Trump has clashed with Europe. Remember when he pulled out of the Paris Climate Agreement? Or when he slapped tariffs on European goods? Yeah, good times. The question now is whether the US and Europe can overcome their differences and present a united front against Russian aggression. Because if they can't, things are going to get a whole lot worse before they get better. The price of impunity. Will Russia get away with it? If Russia isn't held accountable for its actions in Ukraine, it will send a chilling message to the world that might makes right. And that's a recipe for disaster. Imagine a world where powerful countries can invade their neighbors, commit atrocities, and face no consequences. It's not a pretty picture. The international community has to stand firm and show Russia that its actions have consequences. Otherwise, we risk emboldening other authoritarian regimes and ushering in a new era of global instability. A world on edge. What does this mean for global security? Trump's decision to potentially abandon the prosecution of Russian war crimes comes at a time when the world is already on edge. The war in Ukraine has destabilized the region, and the threat of nuclear conflict is more real than it's been in decades. In this climate of fear and uncertainty, the last thing the world needs is for the U.S., the self-proclaimed leader of the free world, to abdicate its responsibility to uphold international law. The stakes couldn't be higher. The decisions made today will shape the world for generations to come. We can choose to stand up for what's right, or we can stand by and watch as the world descends into chaos. The fight for justice continues. Can Ukraine still find hope? Despite the setbacks and disappointments, the fight for justice in Ukraine continues. Human rights organizations are working tirelessly to document war crimes and hold perpetrators accountable. And the Ukrainian people, despite facing unimaginable hardship, remain defiant in their pursuit of peace and justice. The road ahead will be long and difficult, but there is still hope. The international community must come together and support Ukraine in its quest for justice. We cannot allow impunity to prevail. The future of international law is might making right. The situation in Ukraine is a test for the international legal order. If Russia is allowed to get away with its actions, it will set a dangerous precedent for the future. It will send a message that international law is nothing more than a piece of paper, and that might makes right. The world is watching. The decisions made today will determine whether we live in a world governed by law or by force.